a solid attempt to get to the truth of all things. Welcome, my mere mortalites, to another round of the Mere Mortals book reviews. My name is Kyron, and I do these reviews for those who want to transcend beyond their own mere mortality, to get deeper into the philosophical books, maybe, that they're reading, into the treatises that they're reading, and maybe even to the meditation practices. Indeed, we do have Meditations on First Philosophy by René Descartes. This book was published in 1641, and it's about 60 pages in length. If you can see the video, it is extremely short. It's a philosophical treatise designed to prove the existence of God. So he really came into this with an explicit purpose. I'm going to make the non-believers believe. And so he does this through 6 meditations, and I'll be covering those in a bit of depth soon. This is an examination mostly of his own mind to find truth. So he's really trying to distill what is truth, and he has some really great analogies, some practical examples of how truth, although it might seem rock solid when you get deeper into it, oh, you know what? How are my senses playing differently in a dream? I could have sworn that was the truth, that was real then. So he talks about matter, he talks about senses, he talks about what are ideas, and he gets into some more even deeper things like arithmetic and how different ideas play differently, and how you can be more sure of some than you can be of others. So why is this book important, and who was René Descartes? Well, he is known as the father of modern philosophy. So he really wrote some amazing things. Most of you will know the quote, cogito, ergo sum, or I think, therefore I am. This isn't contained exactly within this book, but man, that principle, that idea flows throughout from almost the very first page. So he really is sort of preaching his core philosophy, I guess. This book actually came from a period of deep reflection and of serious writing, and it really does just try and distill his main philosophy, his thoughts, I guess. And so there's the translation itself in particular, so that it was originally written in Latin. I have the translation by Donald A. Kress, the 3rd edition. And so he translated this directly from the Latin, unlike most of the other translations of this, which actually come from a translation in French and then a translation from the French version. So, we're skipping out one translation with this one, which is good. I'm going to jump onto their theme, and normally with the themes, you'll see, Karen's like looking at something a little bit deeper beneath the surface perhaps, but today I'm going straight in. We're just going to dive right into the 6 meditations, the philosophical demonstration of God. So I'm going to read them out just one by one as I come across them, and I'll even say the page number from this particular version. So the first one begins on page 13, and I just call this doubt. And so this is meditation 1, concerning those things that can be called into doubt. This is where he really tries to start off. Okay, what can I be sure of? And he provides the example of sleep. I could have sworn out those things I was imagining, that were in my brain were real, but my senses were deceiving me. And so suppose that God, or perhaps an evil genius or an evil demon or something like that, is deceiving me. That's where I'm going to start off with. So I'm going to start off with a point of skepticism, almost the doubting part. I need to be sure of what it is that I'm actually believing and seeing and thinking and feeling. Okay, imagine something is really trying to deceive me. How can I find out what is the base layer of reality? So this is where we go into meditation number 2 on page 17, which is concerning the nature of the human mind that is better known than the body. So there's just sort of the I section. So this is where he comes up with the thing that he's not a body, but he's a thinking thing. And that's the direct translation, or at least in this book. He's a thinking thing. And so this is where he's really getting into the I think, therefore I am sort of part of it, where it's I can only be sure of that my mind is here, that something is happening. I can't be sure that this water bottle I'm holding up is real, that this matter, because I could be dreaming, or I could be in a coma, or I could, in the modern day, we would say, I could be in a virtual reality, I could be in a alternate parallel universe, I could be in the Matrix, any of these number of things. But what I can be sure of is that something is happening, that there is a sort of consciousness, that there is an I. So he also has a comparison in here to melting wax for changes, and talking about how is a wax, which is a solid object, you melt it and you would still say it's wax, but principal properties of it has changed. And so how can you describe that one thing is a thing as well? We then go on to the third meditation. So he's very doubtful at the start. Then he's found, okay, I can base some sort of rock solidness on the fact that something is happening, even though I can't base it on the things that are around me per se. So on page 24 is where he goes into his third meditation concerning God, that he exists. So this is really, I would say, talking about causality for the most part. So this is where he comes up with 3 classes of ideas, and I'll read those out to you so you can get a feel for it. So he says, among these ideas, some appear to me to be innate, some adventitious, and some produced by me. For I understand what a thing is, what truth is, what thought is, and I appear to have derived this exclusively from my very own nature. But say I'm now hearing a noise or looking at the sun or feeling the fire. Up until now, I judged that these things proceeded from certain things outside of me. And finally, that sirens, hippogriffs, and the like are made by me. Or perhaps I can even think of these things as being adventitious or as being innate or as fabrications, for I have not yet clearly ascertained their true origin. So yeah, he comes up with 3 classes of ideas. The one, which is innate to him, it sort of comes from within. Another, which is coming from without, that is from the senses. And then this sort of third one, which is it's like made up by him. So it's kind of hard to wrap your head around, and there's some sources that I'll link it to at the end or talk about at the end, which you can understand this a little bit better. But basically it comes in this section to the idea that, okay, there's these 3 classes of ideas. One of these I can be rock solid of, which is the things that are innate. So I'm not making them up. They're not coming from me from the outside. They're just within me. There's no escaping them. And this is where he starts making the case for God, and in particular, he bases this argument on causality. When something happens, there is, I think it's one of the laws of physics or thermodynamics, something like that. Each action has a equal and opposite reaction sort of thing. So something has to be derived from somewhere. So I sneezed, it had to be caused because of something, in my nose tickling me or whatnot. This thing is moving through space. It had to be because of gravity. And what is pushing is also pulling, et cetera, et cetera. So it's always saying that there's a causality. There always has to be something that comes from something else, I guess. So this is when we get into the fourth, and this is on page 35 if you're following along. And so meditation 4, concerning the true and the false. And so this is error in particular that he's really examining there. So he's really trying to, he asks a question to himself sort of, which is, how can there be true and false? And this is where he's really starting to push the arguments for God a lot more. So this is where he's saying, okay, there's a causality to things, and therefore, if you go all the way back, there must be a God, which is the starter, the principle. This is where everything originated from. And if this is the case, why isn't everything perfect? Why didn't God, if God is, all-knowing, all-understanding, all good, why is there bad things in the world, essentially? Things like that. And he really is sort of putting this in a different box, an analogy, I guess you could call it, and not saying why is there bad things, but why is there truth and false? Why is there error? And because that's sort of where he's deriving bad things from. And so a couple of the arguments is he has limited understanding. So if he could understand things, he could understand the whole network and see, okay, God has created it this way, and it is in its entirety perfect. Free will, he's been given free will, yet this comes with a price, and that price is, some bad things are going to happen. Error essentially is the absence of what is correct, is the kind of final outcome that he comes to, which is error isn't a thing in of its own. It's a lacking of something. And this might seem like pedantic, might seem like a subtle difference, but when you're getting into theology and things like this, these type of arguments make a big deal. They matter. So we're skipping now onto page 42 for the fifth meditation, which is meditation 5, concerning the essence of material things, and again concerning God, that he exists. So he's coming back to God again. So this is more proof. He's really showing in this section, okay, there's certain ideas that are just immutable. They're rock solid, and it doesn't matter if my senses are trying to deceive me, or that an evil demon or an evil genius is trying to deceive me. Some of the ones that he provides as examples are a triangle, for example. So in a dream or in real life, or no matter where it is in metaphysical made up land, a triangle is always going to have 180 degrees. There's no possible way outside of this. And so he sort of uses this as an analogy for why the idea of God is just as certain. And so he tries to relate these two things, and once again, just trying to provide more proof to the unbelievers to really nail it home. And then we come to meditation number 6. So this is on page 47, and this is concerning the existence of material things and the real distinction between mind and body. So yeah, this is the mind and body section, I guess, which is, he's saying they are distinct things. So there's the mind, this which is encased within a body, but what happens in here is kind of distinct from the body, the material, physical atoms. They're separate things. He also says, though, they commingle. So a bit of annoying, kind of like a fence-sitting type behavior that, I'm impressed. I like fence sitters. And he provides some examples for this as well, saying how thirst and pain and things like that, it's kind of like a real nuanced part, but it's where he's going to say that the thirst is a physical bodily thing. It is triggered by certain aspects in, let's just say, the real world or in the sense world. But if we dive deeper into the mind and we have a look at how thirst behaves and what is the idea, the concept of thirst, this is where he's saying this is more like a mind thing, sort of separate from the body. Comes up with some other arguments. The body is divisible, the mind is indivisible, really trying to point out how they are two different things. This section I wouldn't say is particularly in line with the proving of God part, although I'm sure I've misread something or something like that, and it was integral because he spent a lot of time on this book, and it wasn't, I'm sure he didn't include a meditation 6 just to flesh it out a bit more, So this is probably the part where I'm starting to slip away a little bit. And this gets me right into the observations and takeaways. So I was going to say this at the end, but I'll bring it right now. The clearness, the clarity of what he's saying, my understanding of it went from, okay, bang on, I know exactly what you're talking about in the first meditation, the second meditation, it's starting to slip a little bit, the third, fourth, okay, I kind of get it, but this is where I noticed myself kind of getting a little bit bored, not understanding some things as clearly as I did before. And then we get into fifth and sixth, and it's not gibberish, but it's not as understandable as the first part. Now, I don't want to blame any of this on the translation or even particularly the writing itself. So I've covered this before in some books like Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations or The Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes, those real old English books. They can be very difficult to read, and it's due to the actual language itself. Words have changed meaning over time, and the understanding that I can get as a 2020 English speaker is very different than what perhaps a 1900s English speaker could reading the same works. This I wouldn't say is the case for this book. I feel like the translation is pretty modern day language. It's not written in the style that you would see normal books nowadays, so the sentences go on a little bit longer. He uses commas in different ways and things like that. But in terms of readability, I think it's fantastic. I think it's wonderfully readable. It is just the ideas and the concepts that he's talking about. I feel they start to get a little bit looser, and he starts adding in more things which aren't that rock solid base of this is the core understanding. I think, therefore I am. And as he adds more stuff in, I start to drift away. I found it harder to comprehend. So the underlying start point was to prove God's existence as well. So he really started off the book with something that he wanted to achieve. And I think that kind of conflicts with finding the truth. So I think it's almost like when I was reading the myth of Sisyphus, the thing that Albert Camus started with was there's only one question, and that's like to whether to commit suicide or not. And the idea kind of behind that, I think, was I'm going to follow the truth and really examine whether life is worth living. And I can't speak for him. I don't know if he would have done this or not, but the implication there is if it's not, and I logically cannot think of any other way or even emotionally why life is worth living, I should commit suicide. That's the morally right thing to do. This, I think, is kind of comparable in that he's trying to find the truth no matter what, but he also explicitly states, I'm trying to prove God's existence at the same time. And I'm not sure those two ideas, those two processes can be really melded together like this. I think like you should do one or you should do the other, but it's kind of corrupting of both of them to do it this way. And how does he say that? Well, in the preface and even to the introduction to the reader, he talks about why the letter of dedication, I should say, to the person he originally wrote this for, because this was back in the day of politics, writing politics in the sense that you needed a patron, and the patron would promote your works and talk about you in the high exalted circles, and then this would spread out your works and things like that. I'm sure there's politics nowadays, but it's a little bit different. It's more companies rather than individuals. So yeah, I was just kind of iffy on that aspect of his starting point for why he was writing the book and those two sections. On terms of has it convinced me to believe in God? Not particularly. I felt that there was some arguments, sort of logical, scientific arguments that could be made, and also the ability that we have of some other things in some ways prove his points, i.e. the senses. They didn't have the idea of the matrix back then. They didn't have the idea of artificial intelligence and things like that, and multiple parallel universes and things like this, and black holes and how weird atoms can behave, and quarks and stuff like that, which I think proves this point. It's almost like the more we learn, the less reliable we can say, like, yeah, this is a book, this is wood. I know how wood behaves. And then you get down to the very, bottom, smallest atomic structure of it, and it's like, what the fuck? So that kind of helped. But I think in some other ways, in terms of his causality arguments, for example, I believe that there's things that can just happen, like atoms can randomly pop up in other places in the universe without a particular reaction, a causal effect to it. My understanding of science could be wrong there, but the reasons for believing in God became too tenuous for me. I couldn't understand. I couldn't see how the idea was so immutable that it can only come from within. Like if the Bible had never been written, you followed his method, you would still come to the idea of God anyway. I can't particularly see it. And why the Christian God? Why wouldn't it be the Islamic God, or the any of the number of gods in Hinduism and things like that? So didn't particularly convince me, but I did enjoy the attempt. And the final recommendation almost is, I think reading this with a resource like Wikipedia is pretty damn fantastic, because Wikipedia, it's a huge article on there, almost like the length of the book. And yet it provides examples of what he's talking about, puts it in even more modern day English, and sort of examine it just has a way of fleshing out some of the ideas and made it a bit more clear to me what René Descartes was really trying to do with his works, and in particular the fourth, fifth, and sixth, which is where I was starting to get a little bit hazy on what he was actually talking about there. So, in summary, for a short, old book, it certainly packs a lot of punch. Not only were the ideas clear and brilliant, but it was easy to read as well, which is fantastic for an old book. It's so hard to find that. Lots of nice examples and analogies contained within. It hasn't convinced me of God's existence, but it's shown a very intriguing mode of thinking, of a way of processing and examining deep into yourself. I really liked his method, I should say. On its own, I wouldn't say it's amazing, but combined with some modern resources as well, particularly to understand those last parts, it's a really solid book. And I only wish it was a bit longer, to be honest. So I'm going to give it like a 5.5 out of 10. Meditations on First Philosophy by René Descartes, just if you're reading the book itself. But if you're adding some extra resources like I did with Wikipedia, with a blog or two, you can bump that up easily by a couple of points, because the core principle of what he was trying to do and his method of thinking, I think is really, really fantastic. I really enjoyed that. And that's it for today, my mere mortalites. Thank you for joining into this philosophical one, I guess you'd say, a short philosophical one, because I basically read you the whole book then. Although, of course, the reason I do book reviews is to give you this information, to provide these, I suppose, details that maybe you don't want to read the full book. But if you want the full details, of course, you have to read the book, because this is just my perspective. I'm not giving everything away. I'm not reading out the whole damn book from start to finish. So, I really hope you do enjoy these things, find them useful. And if not, hey, go read the book for yourself, and you can then write me a comment and say how wrong I am. So the best way to get in touch is, like I said, just leave a comment. A subscribe would be nice as well if you're on the YouTube page, and wherever you are in the world. I really do hope you're having a fantastic day. Karen out.